For decades, Charles Bronson stood as one of Hollywood's toughest icons, a silent force with a piercing stare, a man who seemed invincible both on and off the screen. From Death Wish to The Magnificent Seven, he built a reputation as the ultimate stoic hero, a man who could take on entire armies without blinking. But behind the steel-hard exterior was a fragile private world few ever saw. A world shaped by devastating loss, heartbreak, and a love story that ended in unimaginable tragedy. Most fans know Charles Bronson as the fearless vigilante or the rugged gunslinger, but very few know the painful truth about his final years marked by failing health, emotional decline, and the haunting memory of the woman he loved most, his wife, Jill Ireland. Their marriage, often described as one of Hollywood's great romances, was overshadowed by a cruel twist of fate that left Bronson shattered. And when he eventually faced his own final moments, the echoes of that heartbreak were still with him. Today, we uncover the devastating truth behind the tragic deaths of Charles Bronson and his wife. What really happened behind closed doors? What was Bronson hiding from the world as he slowly slipped away? And why do those closest to him still believe his passing was far more heartbreaking than fans ever realized? This is the story Hollywood never told, a story of love, loss, and the shattering end of a legendary life, long before Charles Bronson became one of Hollywood's most commanding screen presences. He was just Charles Bakinski, a poor coal miner's son from Pennsylvania who knew struggle long before he ever knew fame. Born into a large Lithuanian-American family during the Great Depression, Bronson grew up in conditions so hard that hunger was a constant companion. He wore hand-me-down clothes, slept in cramped quarters, and started working in the mines as a teenager just to help keep the family afloat. The brutality of that work, the dust, the heat, the danger began shaping the hardened exterior that would later define his Hollywood image. But beneath that stoic facade was a gentle, deeply emotional man shaped by hardship, loyalty, and a fierce protective nature. When he entered Hollywood in the 1950s, Bronson was unlike anyone else. He wasn't polished, he wasn't classically handsome, and he didn't flash smiles to win over casting directors. He was raw, intense, quiet, and because of that, directors immediately recognized a rare presence. His roles in The Magnificent Seven, The Great Escape, and later Death Wish cemented him as a global star. Yet even as audiences admired his tough guy persona, Bronson himself remained painfully private. Fame didn't excite him, family did. And nothing transformed his life more than meeting the woman who would become his greatest love, Jill Ireland. Jill was an English actress, elegant and spirited, with a warmth that perfectly contrasted Bronson's rugged exterior. Their relationship began in an unusual way. Bronson reportedly told his friend and co-star, David McCallum, that he would marry her one day long before it happened. When Jill and Bronson eventually fell in love, their connection was instant and powerful. They married in 1968 and blended their families, creating a home filled with children, music, laughter, and the quiet domestic life Bronson secretly craved. For Bronson, Jill wasn't just a wife, she was the calm center of his world. She softened him, grounded him, and brought out the tenderness he rarely showed anyone else. They traveled together, worked together, raised children together, and built a partnership so strong that Hollywood often called them inseparable. But behind that picture-perfect marriage, a devastating shadow was waiting, one that would test every ounce of Bronson's strength. In the late 1980s, tragedy struck when Jill Ireland received a diagnosis that changed their lives forever: breast cancer. And for the first time, the man the world believed to be unbreakable found himself facing a battle he couldn't fight with force, anger, or the steely resolve he was known for. Jill's illness tore through their lives with unforgiving pain. She went through surgeries, aggressive treatments, and long periods of uncertainty. Bronson stayed by her side through all of it, every hospital visit, every sleepless night, every terrifying prognosis. Friends later said he became quiet, withdrawn, and more protective than ever, as if he believed sheer willpower could shield her from suffering. But Jill's condition worsened. The woman who had brought warmth to Bronson's life was fading, and he could do nothing to stop it. When she passed away in 1990, Bronson was devastated. Those closest to him said he never fully recovered, that a part of him seemed to die with her. He retreated, became more isolated, and carried the grief silently. The tough man on screen was, in reality, a broken husband mourning the greatest loss of his life. This tragic turning point didn't just mark the end of their beautiful love story. It marked the beginning of Bronson's own slow, heartbreaking decline, one that would ultimately lead to a deeply painful final chapter few knew about. After Jill Ireland's death, in 1990, Charles Bronson faced a world he had never known before, one without the woman who had been his anchor for more than 2 decades. Fans continued to see him on screen, still commanding attention with his intense presence, but behind the camera, Bronson's life had changed irreversibly. The grief was overwhelming. Yet the man who had survived childhood poverty, dangerous jobs, and countless Hollywood challenges found himself powerless against the loss of the love of his life. Friends and colleagues described Bronson as quiet and withdrawn during these years. The robust, stoic persona he had projected in films was replaced by a man who spoke less, smiled less, and carried the weight of profound sorrow. Even when he appeared in public or on film sets, he seemed to be functioning on autopilot, performing because it was expected rather than out of genuine enjoyment. For someone like Bronson, who had spent decades embodying toughness and self-reliance, acknowledging vulnerability was difficult. Yet grief forced him to confront emotions that could not be faked or fought with fists. Financially, Bronson remained secure, but his personal life was in turmoil. He had lost not only his partner, but also the central focus of his family life. Jill had been a co-parent, collaborator, and confidant. Without her, managing relationships with his children and maintaining a sense of normalcy became emotionally taxing. Interviews from this period reveal a man who avoided discussing his private life, choosing instead to let his films speak for him. Friends noted that Bronson spent more time in seclusion, sometimes retreating to his home or engaging in solitary activities to process his grief. Compounding the emotional strain was the relentless attention from the public and the media. Hollywood's fascination with Bronson's toughness conflicted sharply with the reality of his fragile state. Paparazzi, reporters, and fans often misunderstood his silence and somber demeanor, interpreting it as arrogance or detachment. In truth, Bronson was mourning in plain sight, navigating the complex intersection of personal tragedy and public expectation. Despite this, Bronson continued to work, taking roles that allowed him to maintain a presence in the industry while avoiding intense scrutiny. His performances during this period were quieter, more introspective, and occasionally tinged with a vulnerability that reflected his own life experiences. Those closest to him later described a subtle evolution. The man who had once portrayed unflinching vigilantes now channeled his grief into a depth of performance few had expected. In this way, tragedy shaped not only his personal life, but also his artistic legacy. Yet the grief was unrelenting. Charles Bronson, the man who had conquered so many challenges, now faced a battle he could not win. The slow erosion of the heart after losing the one person who had defined his life. Jill's death left a void that no amount of fame, wealth, or cinematic achievement could fill. Friends said he rarely spoke of her passing publicly, choosing instead to carry the memory in private, a silent testament to a love that had defined his existence. By the mid-1990s, those who knew Bronson intimately recognized that he was living with profound sorrow. His health, both physical and emotional, began to decline, accelerated by decades of rigorous work, onset injuries, and the psychological toll of grief. Even as Hollywood celebrated his legendary toughness, Bronson's private world was one of quiet heartbreak, stark contrast to the invincible figures he portrayed on screen. The tragedy of Charles Bronson's life after Jill's passing was a testament to the human cost behind cinematic legend. Fame and admiration could not shield him from loss, and the man who had conquered countless on-screen adversities now faced an ultimate adversary, grief itself. After Jill Ireland's passing, Charles Bronson's life entered a new phase, one marked by increasing solitude, declining health, and the quiet echoes of loss. The man who had once appeared indestructible on screen now faced challenges that fame and toughness could not overcome. Years of intense physical work in films, combined with the emotional strain of grief, began to take a toll on his body and mind. Bronson, known for his stoicism, rarely complained. But those close to him noticed subtle changes: fatigue, weight fluctuations, and a sense of vulnerability that contrasted sharply with his legendary persona. Bronson's public appearances became less frequent, and he often retreated from Hollywood events, interviews, and social gatherings. Friends described him as increasingly introspective, spending long hours alone reflecting on memories with Jill and the life they had built together. This withdrawal was not merely emotional but practical. Bronson's health required careful attention, and he seemed acutely aware of his own mortality. He sought medical care discreetly, often avoiding the spotlight even when treatment necessitated public acknowledgement. Despite these challenges, Bronson continued to work selectively, taking roles that suited his physical limitations while allowing him to remain creatively active. These projects, though fewer in number, often displayed a depth of emotion and subtlety that reflected his personal experiences. Observers noted that the performances were imbued with a quiet vulnerability, a stark contrast to the explosive aggression of his earlier action roles. For Bronson, acting became a form of coping, a way to channel grief and frustration into art. While his health slowly declined, Bronson maintained a private support system consisting of close friends, family members, and longtime colleagues. These individuals provided companionship, assistance, and emotional stability, allowing him to navigate the challenges of aging in relative dignity. Yet, even with this support, Bronson carried a profound sense of loss. Jill Ireland's absence was an ever-present shadow, influencing his mood, decisions, and daily routine. Her death was more than a personal tragedy. It had reshaped the very foundation of his existence. Financial security, fame, and a legendary reputation could not offset the emotional toll. Bronson's life during these years was a mixture of quiet resilience and profound sorrow. He continued to engage with his fans occasionally, offering glimpses of warmth and humor. But these moments were fleeting. Behind the cameras, his days were largely private, filled with memories, reflection, and an ongoing struggle to reconcile the past with an uncertain future. The culmination of these years of grief and physical decline ultimately contributed to his own passing in 2003 at the age of 81, while official reports cited respiratory failure and complications related to pneumonia. Those closest to him acknowledged that the emotional and psychological weight of losing Jill had left a permanent mark. His death was mourned worldwide, not only because of his cinematic legacy, but also because it marked the end of a life profoundly shaped by love, loss, and enduring resilience. Bronson's story illustrates the complex human reality behind Hollywood legends. Audiences remembered the stoic, unflinching hero on screen, but very few grasped the fragility beneath that exterior. The man who had conquered on-screen villains and dangerous stunts had been humbled by grief, illness, and the simple, relentless passage of time. His life, intertwined with Jill Ireland's, serves as a poignant reminder that fame and toughness cannot shield anyone from the universal human experiences of love, loss, and mortality. Through these final years, Charles Bronson remained true to himself, resilient, dignified, and quietly courageous. His personal tragedy, largely unseen by the public, adds a deeply human dimension to the legend of Hollywood's ultimate tough guy, proving that behind even the most unyielding personas, there is a heart capable of profound love and profound loss. Charles Bronson's legacy is often defined by his iconic roles: the silent vigilante, the unyielding gunslinger, the man whose toughness seemed unmatched. Yet, the true story of his life is far more complex, intertwined with love, loss, and personal resilience. The tragic deaths of both Bronson and his beloved wife Jill Ireland reveal a narrative of heartbreak behind the glamorous surface of Hollywood, a story that few fans fully comprehend. Jill Ireland was more than a wife. She was Bronson's confidant, collaborator, and emotional anchor. Their love endured for decades, surviving the pressures of Hollywood fame and the demands of family life. When Jill succumbed to breast cancer in 1990, Bronson was left not only with grief but with a profound sense of incompleteness. The loss altered the trajectory of his life, leaving him emotionally fragile even as the world continued to see him as the ultimate tough guy. This contrast between public perception and private reality highlights a key truth. Bronson's strength was not invincibility, but his ability to carry immense pain quietly and with dignity. In the years following Jill's death, Bronson faced mounting health challenges. including respiratory issues that would ultimately contribute to his passing in 2003. Yet even in his final years, he demonstrated remarkable resilience. Friends recall that he remained private, disciplined, and committed to his children, often reflecting on the life he had shared with Jill and the lessons of love and loyalty she had imparted. His decline was gradual, but the shadow of grief loomed over every moment, underscoring how intertwined his life had been with hers. Bronson's story is also a lesson in the human cost of fame. Hollywood immortalized his tough guy image, yet the cameras never captured the quiet suffering he endured after losing Jill. His public persona masked a man capable of deep emotion, a man who had loved fiercely and grieved profoundly. This duality makes his story compelling, a reminder that the figures we idolize are human, and that strength often includes the ability to endure heartbreak and continue forward despite it. The deaths of Charles Bronson and Jill Ireland collectively paint a portrait of love and tragedy that resonates beyond Hollywood. Their relationship, marked by devotion, sacrifice, and shared hardship, stands as a testament to the power of connection in a world often defined by fame and superficiality. While Bronson's on-screen legacy continues to entertain and inspire, the private story of his love for Jill and the heartbreak of her loss reveals a depth of character that adds profound humanity to his legend. Today, audiences remember Bronson as a cinematic icon, but those who study his life understand that his true heroism lay in his personal courage. He faced adversity as a young man in poverty, as a performer navigating a demanding industry, and as a husband confronted with the illness and death of his soulmate. His story is not simply one of action-packed films and memorable lines, it is a story of resilience, loyalty, and the quiet dignity with which he faced life's harshest realities. Ultimately, the tragic deaths of Charles Bronson and Jill Ireland serve as a poignant reminder that love and loss are inseparable parts of the human experience. Bronson's life demonstrates that fame cannot shield anyone from heartbreak, but it also illustrates how enduring love can define a person's legacy. Through the pain, through the grief, and through the years of private struggle, Charles Bronson remained a man of integrity, courage, and profound humanity, a man whose story, both on and off screen, continues to move and inspire generations.